Impolite Company is a captivating debut novel that looks into the private lives of Charleston's aristocracy. Today, I talk one-on-one with the author of the novel, Gervais Hagerty, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook.
Gervais Hagerty, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. You know, you are a local author here in Charleston who actually grew up here south abroad. And I know that you also work as a newspaper reporter and producer for both radio and television broadcasters. And now, of course, you are the author of a captivating debut novel called Impolite Company. Obviously, that looks inside private lives of all of Charleston, Charleston elite class and whatnot, where a former debutee learns that sometimes good behavior leads to bad decisions. Let me ask you this, Gervais. Why Impolite Company? Why now?
Oh, well, I couldn't help it really. I just had a story I wanted to tell. It sort of came out of me. It wasn't a plan to be a novelist, but it just became an impulse, and that impulse became a dream. And here I am with my book, and I'm really, really happy to be in that place.
And what was that place before Impolite Company was published?
Well, actually, it was a wonderful place. I was a professor at the Citadel. I taught communications. I absolutely adored my job. And I also had an enviable faculty schedule, which meant I had large breaks around the holidays and over the course of the summer. And so during that time, I would write. I would write a ton. And then I got to a point when I had finished this book and I thought, I really want to see if I can make this my career. And that's when I left the Citadel. And it's wonderful when decisions in your life are hard and that you're often choosing between two really good places. And I was treated so well there. But I also just really had to try and see if this new life would work for me.
And now that you have this new life that's working for you, how are you actually politely changing the world with this book?
Gosh, that would be great if I were changing the world. But the world has changed for me that I get to be a writer and talk about my novel. And just this last weekend, we had a lot of very esteemed writers come to Charleston for this event called Zibby Retreats. Zibby's a publisher out of New York, and we had a lot of big names. And because I'm from here and I pulled some strings, I got to be one of the panelists. So, you know, slowly in my own little corner, I do feel like I'm getting to amplify my thoughts through my words. And I really hope to get to continue to do that.
How were you able to amplify your thoughts and words in an Impolite Company?
Well, I like to think fiction, to write it well or to write it at all, it has to be your thoughts and ideas. It's a part of you. And I had a lot of thoughts and ideas about the city. And you must have a lot of thoughts and ideas about the city because you know it so well, because you were interviewing all these different roles. And you and I share a lot of the same impulses. We want to know, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? And, you know, having worked in news before I worked at the Citadel, I was always like, I'm just interested in other people. Yeah. And I tried a career in news, and it was really hard, and it wasn't the lifestyle I wanted. I think you're doing such a cool thing because that's pretty much what I wanted to do, is these long form, more intimate interviews. But yeah, I've always just been kind of curious about how people decide to do what they want to do. And then I guess more on a psychological level, that's something that I get to play with my characters, because you're trying to understand, when you try to understand characters, you're trying to understand people.
Right.
And what makes them tick, and why my character would, you know, pick up a cup of coffee a certain way, or yell a certain way, or walk a certain way.
Which particular character describes you?
In the novel?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I mean, the protagonist is Simmons, so I really identify with her. But one thing I've learned about writing, and I really struggled writing my second book, one thing I've learned about writing is you have to be every character. You
Mm.
have to really respect that character, even if you might not like them. And you have to kind of embody who that person is to understand, like I said, how they would lift that coffee cup or how they would walk.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I definitely identify with the protagonist, Simmons Smythe. It's a coming of age novel based in Charleston, and she shares a lot of the experiences that I have, but they're definitely not, it's not what really happened to me,
Right.
because I, it's just more interesting in a novel. You can up the stakes. But even some more minor characters, like the father figure, that is not me. It was not my father.
Right.
But I had to kind of think, like, how would a person like that, approach the world? So I'm a little bit of everybody. Simmons has a best friend named Martha. They often meet up at Kudu. Do you ever go to Kudu Coffee?
Oh,
Yeah.
right down the corner here. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And I love going there. I was just there the other day.
Yeah.
And they meet up, and they're kind of frenemies, right? They kind of they've had a long history, and they're at a part in their lives where lives are changing, and they're going to end up branching out.
Right.
And that character, some people would say, oh, I didn't like Martha, or Simmons needed to get rid of her. But I was also a big part of Martha was who I was. She was more daring than I am as a person. She's more impulsive than I am. And I want to be that person in a lot of ways. So I really enjoyed that. Might have been my favorite character to write, actually.
So how do you up the stakes in polite company?
Well, let's see. I try to think about what I want to say from my heart. The novel got started, essentially, my grandmother was in hospice. She's from here. And I was sad, as anybody would be sad. And I was trying to figure out how to deal with my grief. And a lot of what I thought about was, here she is at the end of her life, this Southern woman. What would the end of her life had been if she had been encouraged to be educated, to get a job, those sorts of things. And so I was really thinking about that as I wrote this novel, but it wasn't enough just to have a grandmother character that is missed. That grandmother character had to have a backstory. My mentor, Mary Alice Monroe, in fact, we were just talking about you over the weekend. We were together, we were at we had an event together, the Zibby Books retreat. She might have mentioned earlier, but she's like, you've got to do a Quintin's close-up. And I was like, absolutely. So I was super excited. But I took my novel to her, and she said, there's a problem with it. You need to up the stakes with the grandmother. You need to give her a backstory. I know you care as a writer about her, but you have to make the reader care. And so I created a backstory of her being a dancer. She was not a dancer. I created a backstory of her running off to Atlanta. She didn't do that. But that really was the key in making the book special and sellable, and I'm very grateful for her help. And that is a key example of upping the stakes in the novel.
Wow. So who do you really respect as a character in this book?
Who do I respect? I mean, I respect them all. I really did come out of love for every single one of them. When I started writing my second book, I wrote an older woman and the matriarch of this family that lives on a barrier island in an aging manor. And I didn't respect her. I was kind of making her this silly lady with lots of cleavage and leopard print outfits and making silly jokes. And she didn't land well. And I thought she was funny, but no one else laughed at my jokes, the early readers. And I realized that I wasn't coming at her from a place of love and respect. And I really latched on to an entirely different concept of that character as a person, somebody that I admired. She doesn't know who she is, but it's somebody I've kind of remotely stalked and studied to be this character. And so I've just learned it's really got to be everybody as you're writing them.
Oh, yes. And going back to Simmons, how does Simmons pave the path away from outdated expectations?
Well, it's a tricky one because I wanted to write a novel that made sense to me. And I often find in life that if you're trying to change your community, right? If you're trying to change how they think about, let's say, about a feminist idea, you can't just say, screw everybody, I'm leaving, you aren't doing what I think. I think a much more impactful way, though it might not seem as powerful at the time, is to, have it in narrative form, like in this book, engage in dialogue and create a character that is palatable to somebody who might not necessarily agree with her politics. So I've gone to some book clubs and I've definitely gotten a finger wagging. But I don't like what she said about the church. I don't like what she said about this. And I was really grateful to be there because you know what? They read the book. And you know what's even crazier? They came to talk to me. And that was a conversation. And that's an awesome thing to be able to occupy their mind for a little while and suggest a new way of thinking. And so I'm really incredibly grateful for that.
What other conversations have you heard about as a result of Impolite Company?
Let's see. Well, it was really fun. I keep talking about this past weekend, but it's just what's so fresh in my mind, just to have people who have fallen in love with the book. And I mean, everybody likes to feel a little special, right? So that's been really, really lovely, is the feedback. I also am probably most proud of the feedback from the locals. The best thing I've heard is, you nailed Charleston. And it's been from some people that I might not have thought who would have said that. So I feel proud of that, and I worked really hard, and I'm grateful that paid off.
Yes, indeed. So how do you view Charleston now?
Well, this book I like to think is as a love letter to Charleston. And if you were to write a love letter to any person, nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect, right? So, if you really love somebody, you're also thinking about, how can they change? What can I do to help them? And so, I don't know, Charleston I'm really grateful for the new sets of ideas that have been coming through this town. I'm very worried about the development that is, building on lowlands, taking over, forested areas that could be preserved. So that is very apparent in my novel. And my second novel carries the same sort of thread about the importance of conservation. And I'm a hippie at heart. I care about our planet. I hate buying new things. You'll see me in the same clothes all the time. And I just want to make people aware of our choices in a way that like I said earlier, talking about kind of the feminist aspect, also just about the environmental aspect. If I'm too pedantic, if I'm too much of a finger wagger myself, people don't want to read that. They want to read in a story they can escape to. And these are these delicate balances that I'm learning and probably will be studying my entire writing career.
Wow. So how people are still able to escape due Impolite Company?
Oh, well, I mean, buying the book. They can go or sleep anywhere, and it's all at the local stores and, of course, the big box stores. But if you can buy local, that's always the right thing to do.
Sure.
But I also think it's a great book for locals, right? Because you can kind of see the city through a different perspective. But also, it's a great read for somebody who loves to visit here and wants to come back but doesn't have the time or the money. You can do it for, I don't know, $16.99 and really live and understand a certain perspective that I've had, and it's one that I believe, I have a lot of knowledge and history here.
Absolutely. Is your particular book part travel guide, part novel?
Well, it's kind of funny. Some of my reviews on Goodreads, the ones that aren't so good, are like, gosh, she just talks about Charleston too much. It's like a travel guide. But some people love that, right? Yes. And that's another thing I've learned about this business. It is so subjective. It's so subjective. So, I mean, yes, you'll get good and bad reviews. And I think it's just about finding your right audience. Just in life, it's about finding your people, the ones who you feel comfortable and kind of get you. And it's always going to be like that. And I'm grateful for a platform to, that's all right. You don't like it. I'm glad you bought it. Thanks for taking a chance. So any one of those, I'm even if it's like not the best review, I'm grateful for it, and I enjoyed writing those scenes because I like being in those different places within Charleston.
Within Charleston, you know all about it because we both grew up here, so we know.
Yeah, it's a magical place.
Absolutely. Yeah. Who is your audience?
Well, that's a question that the publisher tries to find out. Mostly when I go speak, it's women my age, maybe a little older. But I'd love to say, it could be for anybody. One of the best letters I ever got about this book, it was written by author Ravenel Sr.'s wife. The Ravenel Bridge,
right.
She had written me a letter saying how she was so surprised to see her husband reading my novel because he only reads nonfiction mostly. And he said that he really enjoyed it. He thought it was a really good book. So, the men who read it, I think they've been surprised by how much they enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. I think so much of literature that we study in our young years, it's written by men, and especially the older men that I know probably have never read a book written by a woman. And so I think, yes, I think my book is pretty great, but really I think what they were so enthralled by was the perspective of coming of age in their city, but through the eyes of a woman. I think that's what really stuck with them. Maybe, I don't know. But either way, they liked it, and that made me happy.
Yes, and of course, many years ago, before he passed away, I had him on Quintin's Close-Ups for an interview, and that was a very, very compelling interview as well. So
I'm not at all surprised. You really made your mark on this town. Good for you. It's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, it's the grace of God.
Follow your passion. It's exhausting. It's good. Good for
thank God. Yeah, thank God for the people that I've interviewed, including yourself.
Yeah.
Oh man, what is the biggest difference about that perspective on Charleston from when you were growing up to now that you're an author and an adult?
Like, what do you mean? How my perspective has changed on the city?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think when you're a child, just like how I was liking this to a love letter, when you're a child, relationships are a lot simpler, right? If you were to write a love letter, it would be very basic. But as you get older, it's more complicated. I'm very lucky to have been here for a long time, and I'm lucky to have had a very supportive community and family who have, benefited from being here. And I understand that. But I also, as I get older, that's not enough for me to just say, my family's been here for generations. Like, what does that mean? Mm. Like, that doesn't mean I've done anything good. That doesn't mean I've helped the city. It just means that I have been, eating the fruits of their labor, and other people's who have provided for the for the city, and often unfairly, right? And so I guess what I see now when I think about my city is, what impact do I want to leave? How do I want to make my city better? And so that's the more critical lens I'm looking at now as an adult.
And when you look back at that book, In Polite Company, what does it really mean to you?
It means that I took a chance on a dream. It also is, also what I've learned is art comes from hard places. Mm. And I think so many books, paintings, theater, to really tap into like what's in here, it often comes from a place of hurt, and you're trying to make the world right. And so that's kind of what I've come away with. Is I had a lot of thoughts. I was going through a separation, and I was pretty heartbroken, and then heartbroken about my grandmother. And I just feel very grateful that I had an impulse to take a lot of pain and to put it into something what I consider beautiful.
Yes. If you could write a book about your grandmother, what would be the title of that?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I mean, really, this one really is a love letter to her as well. So it would just be impolite company. Originally, the book title was Zinnias because my grandmother planted zinnias. She taught me to plant zinnias. But when I got a publisher, my editor wisely said, they're just going to think it's a gardening book, so you need to name it something else. And my editor has always been right, and I'm grateful for her guidance.
Guidance, absolutely. Speaking of which, what's next for you?
Well, I just finished my second novel, and now I am looking to sell it. So I'm really proud of it. I worked really hard. I think it's a sexy Southern family drama. I mentioned how I worked at the Citadel. It's got a cadet in it, and I really love it. So next, I've got to find a team who feels the same way, and I'm really excited about that. And then once I get all that buttoned up, I'll go back to working on my third novel, which I just got started, but it's going to be based in the mountains near Hendersonville at a family camp. So I really want to keep going.
Yes.
And I'm just hustling.
That's all. That's all you can do. That's all you can do.
That's right. You're right. Yeah.
Well, international offer. I'm going to call you international offer. Gervais.
That's great. I think one person in Spain bought it, so that counts, right?
That counts. Gervais Hagerty, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.